welcome to WION World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates from the world's most volatile region. The United Arab Emirates is looking at the future, and for this, it is attempting a radical image makeover. In a bid to attract foreign tourists and funding investors, the United Arab Emirates has brought in sweeping changes. But in another Gulf nation, rainbow-colored toys are being seized. Qatar says these children's toys are un-Islamic, even as the 2022 Qatar chief claims that LGBTQ fans are welcome at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. We tell you more.
The Emirates is on a reforming spree. The UAE is bringing in more and more big legal and social changes. The plan is to attract the best and the wealthiest to its shores, to cater to Western liberal sensitivities and open up the Emirates to the world. In the latest announcement, the UAE says that there will be no censorship for nude and explicit content. The international version of the films will be screened at theaters. The only catch is age restriction. A new 21+ rating will be introduced for films. This is not the only reform it has enforced. In recent years, the UAE enacted some of the largest legislative reforms in its history. A total of 40 laws were amended. So what are these changes? The first is a political one, the Abraham Accords. The UAE has formalized its relationship with Israel, something that was unthinkable a few years ago. The relationship has led to growing trade and even a first historic visit by an Israeli Prime Minister. Besides this, the UAE has introduced a 4.5-day work week. The weekend will now start from Friday afternoon, running through Saturday and Sunday. This is more in line with Western schedules. But why is the United Arab Emirates doing all this? What explains these sweeping winds of change in the Emirati landscape? A simple answer is economic. The petrodollar could become irrelevant in the next few decades. The UAE is the 5th largest economy in West Asia. For years, the Emirates has positioned itself as the financial and tourism hub. It is building luxury hotels and developing real estate. But the pandemic has resulted in the collapse of tourism. Investment is not so easy to come by for a nation so reliant on expats to function. It is trying to change with the times by sacrificing its old ways. But its neighbor seems to think otherwise. We are talking about Qatar. Recently, Doha seized rainbow-colored toys for children. Why? Because Qatar thinks they are un-Islamic. This is the same country that will host the World Cup in 2022. Qatar says LGBTQ fans are welcome, but the latest crackdown signals otherwise. Homosexuality is illegal in Qatar. It is punishable by a number of penalties, ranging from flogging to imprisonment and execution. Same-sex marriages and civil partnerships are not recognized by the Qatari government. Campaigning for queer rights is outlawed here. Qatar 2022 chief promises a tolerant host nation, but the Gulf nation is not new to human rights violations. It is an absolute monarchy, with freedoms in check. But the sporting community seems to have turned a blind eye towards this. The question remains, will this taint the legacy of football? West Asia Bureau, WION. World is One.
From greeting foreign leaders to heading regional summits, it is impossible to miss the looming presence of Mohammed bin Salman. The Crown Prince is taking over his father's reins, becoming Saudi Arabia's uncrowned king. We tell you more.
As Gulf leaders landed in Riyadh for the GCC summit, Mohammed bin Salman looked like a man in charge. The Saudi Crown Prince was there, waiting on the tarmac to greet his neighbors, stepping into his father's shoes once again. King Salman was a no-show at the meeting. It is usually the Saudi monarch who heads the annual meeting. This time his absence loomed large. In the last 20 months, King Salman has made only one public appearance. Most of the time, he was staying in Neom. This is the pet project of the same man who will one day formally take his throne. His last trip abroad was to Oman in January 2020. His last meeting with a foreign official was in Riyadh the same year. When he sat down with the then UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab, his absence became even more conspicuous. When French President Emmanuel Macron visited Riyadh, he was one of the first Western leaders to visit since the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Many expected the king to be out and about to greet Macron, but instead the Crown Prince was there. Mohammed bin Salman was appointed as the heir to the throne in June 2017, but his growing prominence has never been more apparent. He has sought to position himself as a champion of moderate Islam. The Crown Prince's 2030 vision is that of a new Saudi Arabia, one that is economically diverse and more tolerant. Riyadh wants to diversify its economy away from oil and attract more investors and even tourists. He has overseen sweeping social changes, allowing women to drive, opening recreational outlets, and now even allowing rave parties. But ironically, all this has come alongside a crackdown on dissent and free speech. Many believe MBS has benefited from the king's longevity. His ongoing presence conveys traditional authority. It covers up for MBS's youth or any unconventional actions he may take, but rarely impedes them. Currently, MBS holds all the reins of Saudi power. He does not seem to be bothered by who also knows it. This is because MBS has no real competitors. Since his rise to power, he has driven out one rival after another, inside or outside the royal family. So MBS's path to the throne seems clear. The king is no longer in the picture. For many, MBS is no longer a king in the making. He is a king in the palace. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more lined up for you on this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, as usual, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
Turkey's domestically developed COVID-19 vaccine Takovac has received emergency use authorization by authorities and will be open to use. President Tayyip Erdogan has said Turkey would make the shot available globally. Israel is set to offer a fourth dose of a COVID-19 vaccine to people older than 60 or with compromised immune systems and health workers, as part of a drive to outpace the spread of the Omicron variant. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi meets with Iraqi Foreign Minister as Tehran seeks to cool down the destabilizing internal unrest in the country after elections. Air raids by the Saudi-led coalition have hit military camps in Sana'a. The coalition says it has destroyed drone and weapons stores in air raids on military camp in the Yemeni capital. Iran's top diplomat says that the European stance is not constructive at nuclear talks. The negotiations will resume on December 27th after the US warned that troubled talks with Iran could be exhausted within weeks. Lebanon's top Christian party has indicated that it is considering ending a political alliance with Hezbollah, threatening a fragile union that has shaped Lebanese politics for nearly 16 years.
The United Nations chief was here in Lebanon. Antonio Guterres laid a wreath for the victims of the Beirut port blast, asking the Lebanese leaders to put the people first. This comes as the economic crisis knocks out the Christmas spirit in Beirut.
I have urged Lebanon's political leaders to work to implement reforms that respond to the demands of the Lebanese people for greater welfare, accountability, protection and transparency in order to restore hope for a better future.
The hope for a better future, proper accountability and political stability. That is what the United Nations Secretary General called for as he visited the West Asian nation. Antonio Guterres was in Lebanon for 4 days. He met political leaders, laid a wreath at the Beirut Blast Memorial, called for free and fair elections, and asked political leaders to put the people first.
إلى تضامن أكبر، ولكن الشعب اللبناني يتوقع أيضا من زعمائه السياسيين أن يعيدوا ترميم الاقتصاد ويؤمنوا حكومة فاعلة ومؤسسات عامة فاعلة ويضعوا حدا.
On his visit, Guterres called for an impartial probe into the last year's disastrous Beirut blast. Just days after he left the country, the probe has been suspended for a record 4th time. 16 months since the monster blast ripped through the Lebanese capital, the judge investigating this has been beset by numerous lawsuits, mostly filed against him by officials demanding his removal. This comes as crisis continues to plague the nation. According to Lebanon's central bank governor, Lebanon's official exchange rate is obsolete. It is currently pegged at £1,500 to $. The fixed rate has guaranteed Lebanese a strong purchasing power for 3 decades.
Of course, the price of 1,507 Lebanese pounds to the $, which allowed Lebanon to have a good economic and social situation for 27 years, is no longer realistic today.
But it went into a tailspin recently. This was when the state defaulted on its debt. In the black market, the dollar hovered around the 30,000 mark. This is almost 20 times the official rate. Now even banks have started using parallel rates. A cap on withdrawal of money has further worsened the crisis. Beirut in December was once a shopping extravaganza. Day-long traffic jams clogged streets. Lanes decked out with flashing Christmas lights and building-sized billboards advertised champagne and jewelry. In barely 2 years of a brutal economic collapse, the lights have gone out on Beirut's commercial heyday, with power shortages leaving streets shrouded in gloom. This year, the billboards tell a different, more frugal story. One that reflects the worst financial crisis to ever hit the once free-spending West Asian nation. Steel safes, banknote counters, discounts on money transfers. These are now the offers plastered on the bridges. These aren't your typical Christmas pleasures, but the reality of Lebanon right now. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
For Syrian refugees, winter spells tragedy. Freezing temperatures and lack of aid means that most of these refugees will be left in their tents, shivering. I earlier visited these tents to see what life is like for those people in these camps. Here's an exclusive ground report.
Children here don't have proper clothes or even a furnace to keep warm, to keep the bitter winter at bay. All they do is burn scraps of garbage.
Every morning I wake up and find that my children aren't near me. They go out early to collect scraps of plastic from the streets, such as bags and shoe soles. Whatever they can find to feed the furnace, which we use to keep warm and cook our meals.
Winter usually spells tragedy for northwest Syria. It is home to more than 3 million people, nearly half of whom have been displaced. In makeshift camps here, the streets turn muddy, the tents are always leaking, inhabitants are dying of hypothermia, or in fires caused by unsafe heating methods. Here are some numbers that highlight only a part of the crisis. Over 12 million Syrians displaced from their homes. Nearly 6.6 million have been forced to flee. Another 6.7 million remain internally displaced, with many living in refugee camps across Syria. I traveled to some of these camps. A glimpse into the lives of those living in the camps shows lack of aid, precarious conditions, and an uncertain future. Aid agencies help insulate tents and provide blankets, but donor funding is struggling to keep up with the demand. $182 million are required to finance winter assistance. Until now, only half of the amount has been secured.
There is a clear failure on the part of all humanitarian organizations, since most camps are suffering from flooding and muddy roads, as well as the difficulty in securing furnaces, birine and fuel oil.
Burning furnaces inside tents spells another problem: respiratory diseases. The tents are usually crowded and smoky, often leading to suffocation.
The smell is strong and there's a lot of smoke. Yesterday, my chest started hurting and I wanted to go see a doctor, but I could not afford it. My hand also hurts because I fell down, and also I have wounds all over it.
Others are leading their lives in ancient ruins. Many remember them from their school trips, never imagining it would once become their home. The site they live in now is an early Christian settlement. Ruins here date back to the 5th century. It has been popular with the displaced because they do not have to pay to stay there.
In the summer, we deal with scorpions, snakes and dust, and all other pressures of life. And in the winter, there is cold and the tents notwithstanding the weather. The situation is desperate. As for health services, they are non-existent.
From freezing temperatures, leaking tents, to respiratory problems. For millions of Syrian refugees, the war may have ended, but the trauma continues. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Every year, the world looks at Bethlehem during Christmas. The biblical town is revered as the traditional birthplace of Jesus Christ. But with the new Omicron variant spreading across the world, what will Christmas look like in the Holy Land?
We hope that with all the procedures that the municipality took and going to take concerning the pandemic and the virus, we hope that we will succeed to keep the situation very calm, very peaceful, and not to have any new infection people of the virus as a result of our procedures that we are taking in the square and in the streets of the city. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Today is better than last year with the pandemic, but always, whatever happened in Jerusalem all around the world, I still give my message, peace and love and giving. And if the peace starts from the heart of the world, Jerusalem, it will be peace all around the world.
I hope that next year, when Bethlehem celebrates Christmas, tourists and pilgrims from all over the world will be able to come and celebrate with us.
West Asia is not without its beauty, culture and oddities. This is why in our next segment, Curiosities, we bring you some heartwarming stories from the region. That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe, and it is the festive season, so have a Merry Christmas. I'm Ghadi Francis coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon, and you're watching WION. World is One.